We've been looking this month at this idea around servant leadership. And what does it mean to come from a place of service? As I've said, so often we think of leadership in terms of our militaristic point of view, where somebody gets to be a general and you all go into war. I choose to be the general, just in case. In fact, I remember Onward Christian Soldiers. Remember that? Marching off to war. Anyways, so this idea of being in leadership and yet being in a place of service. And it seems to me that it is a call to us at this point in our history, both as a collective group of spiritual community as well as at a global level, about how do we serve one another more fully, more graciously, more completely. We live in a very unique and amazing time that everything is connected. You can find out anything at any moment. Something happens across the world. There's an earthquake in Nepal, and we know about it instantly. It's just the most remarkable thing when you think about how connected we are. And so what is being ushered in, I believe, into this new era is a new way of thinking and a new way of being. That we want to move away from a concept of overcoming to a place of embracing, to be in a place of partnership and in a place of service to one another. You see, I was reflecting on this idea of religion is very much in the news, if you hadn't heard. And one of the things that I'm noticing is there's a group of people who are doing great damage in the world under the name of Islam that is not the teachings of Islam. Now, they're not unique in this perspective because every religious tradition has their own, well, I won't say every religious tradition. You rarely hear about the Taoists overtaking, they're all like, just let it flow, right? But, so there is some tradition of religious zealotry and meanness to one another. This is not, though, what you find at the heart of all religious traditions. What we find over and over and over is that at the heart of religious tradition, there is always a calling to our greater being, our greater sense of self. It calls us to serve one another, to give, to serve from the heart, to give to those who are less fortunate, to practice mercy and compassion and charity, to live in a state of grace and humility. So that's the calling, and that's what I believe you find at the heart of all religious tradition. What you sometimes find in the practice of religious tradition is something very, very far away from that. I'm not sure how we get there. I often joke about Jesus coming back. If he does come back, if there is a second coming and Jesus comes back, he's going to be, I said, what? Right? I don't think I said that. I think I said love one another. That's what I think I said, really, right? So I'm reminded of a favorite passage from Matthew that speaks to this beautiful idea. And it says, come, you who are blessed by my Father, and take your inheritance. The kingdom is prepared for you since the beginning of the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. And then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? And the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did to one of the least of these brothers or sisters of mine, you did to me. In that passage, I think we find the very heart of Christianity, the very heart of Christ's love. That says, I said before, that Jesus did not come to us and say, worship me. He said, follow me. He said, act in such a manner that your heart is open, that you are practicing compassion and mercy and love for one another. And that understand, because we are one, when we do this for the least of these, we do this for the whole. It's so easy sometimes to become segregated and separated from one another, to see each other in ways of peace or in ways of separation, in ways of otherness. Part of the great struggles that we experience today, and really the great struggles that we've experienced throughout history, is from that place of separation. I always find it fascinating that for us to be at war with one another, there's always this distancing that happens. There's always this otherness that must happen. We make people the other. You never hear people say, I'm going to go out and kill my brother today. Right? Or my sister. Right? It's always the savages. It's always the evil empire. It's always that kind of thing that we separate from one another. The great call to our awareness today, because we are so connected, we are really, I believe, at a turning point in the history of humanity where we will evolve into this greater consciousness of our oneness, of our wholeness, of our connection, or we will devolve into some very ugly ways. In Course in Miracles, it speaks about the idea is that truth will prevail. It says, even if there's only one of you left, truth will ultimately prevail. So we are a choice. Will we wake up to a greater consciousness, and will we wake up to a greater something? So we feel this pull, this tug that is taking place in our world today between wanting to divide and separate or wanting to unify and co-create. In the Quran it says, whoever works righteousness, man or woman, and has faith, verily to them we will give a new life, a life that is good and pure, and we will bestow on such their reward according to the best of their actions. You see, I'm struck by the parallels that we hear in spiritual truth. Most of us, I realize for me, I have not studied the Quran nearly at the level that I've read the Bible or rather other sacred texts. And I'm feeling the call and the need to move into a greater awareness of the truth of Islam, of this religion of peace, of this compassionate understanding that teaches the same thing of practice compassion, practice service, practice charity. Let our lives be a reflection of the divinity that we are. In the Buddhist doctrinal formula, it says this: just as mother keeps her child from harm and guards him with her life, so you should treasure all living being with a grateful heart, spreading love throughout the world. Protect everyone, everywhere, from hatred, and radiate kindness in all directions. I kind of love that. I like to ask myself this question: am I radiating kindness in all directions? Now, I like to think that I'm pretty good at radiating kindness towards you. So I'm good to the front. But if I were to be completely honest with you, I would admit that sometimes I don't radiate kindness to everyone. There are times in my lower level consciousness when I forget that we are all one, and I see people's behavior and mistake that for who they are. I see people not living up to their potential, and I have been known from time to time to judge them accordingly. But the Buddha is teaching us to radiate kindness in all directions, to practice loving kindness. Jesus is teaching us about grace. The Torah teaches us about justice. You see, at the heart of all religious tradition, there are some very universal themes. That we are here together for a common purpose. That we are here to uplift each other. You see, one of the things that I notice is sometimes in some people's lives, we get so consumed with our practice of our religion that we forget to practice the truth that lies therein. I was sharing earlier, and I don't know if I should be sharing this example, but I'm going to. Because it was kind of classic, and it had to do with an LDS family, but you could just as easily insert good Catholics or any other number of things. So it's not a picking on of LDS, but it had to do with a friend of mine who was my hairdresser for a number of years. Really nice guy and just wonderful, and really enjoyed his presence. And so it was, you know, how you get to know people over every month, seeing them, you know, checking in. And so at one point I said, how are things going? He said, well, I don't know if you know, but I came out. Now, he's 29 years old, never been married, and is a hairdresser. I don't want to superimpose a lot of stereotypes, but it was like, and this is breaking news to whom, right? But apparently, it was to mom and dad, so... Excuse me a second. And they were not okay. Because they had religious doctrine that told them otherwise. Now, how many people do we know that have experienced some sort of situation like that? Isn't that the case? That something happens and we're questioning, like, oh, all of my preconceived ideas may need another look. So as life progressed and many haircuts later, I find out he has a new boyfriend. Wonderful. Young guy, has a couple kids, happy, couldn't be happier. Parents, not happy. This is not good news. As life progresses, then there is just, Christmas, these holidays come, not okay. We're not going to do this. This is inappropriate. This is wrong, blah, 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 blah. Then the new boyfriend finds out he has cancer. And so they're going through a very difficult time as a couple, as a family. And he really went to his family and basically said, if I've ever needed my family, I need you now. And sadly, they couldn't get beyond their religious doctrine. Now, let's all take a moment and judge them, shall we? Just wanton judgment, just let it flow. And then we'll come back and we'll look at our own lives. Right? Are we ever in a place where we can't get beyond our preconceived ideas to be present in love? When we choose to see others as the other, right? So I don't know what the outcome of that story will be. It saddens me that any of us would let our preconceived reality get in the way of that. But you see, this is what happens so often in religion. We let religion get in the way of truth. I've even seen, in my short existence on this planet, metaphysicians. Yes, I'm telling you. There was an exhibit once, the judgmental metaphysician, who mocked and scorned others' approach to the divine. Can you imagine such a thing, right? So, when we come back, this is why I've always loved this teaching, when we come back to the heart of the teaching, it says there is one life. There is one love. There is one power, and we are all some part of it. And there are many pathways to greater understanding, to greater awareness, to greater being in that presence. And all of these religious traditions that we have are simply pointing the way to the mountaintop. But we often confuse them as the way instead of pointing the way. So in this time of change, it seems so apparent to me that it is necessary for us to learn to practice a different way of being together. That the old paternalistic, militaristic approach to leadership perhaps is ready to be reinvented in a new way of being of service to one another first. I was touched by a story that I read around servant leadership, and it was a soldier's story. And he talked about being in the battlefield, and the military had come in to take over a city and to restore order and to do all of the things that militaries do. And he said he noticed this small child in the midst, and he noticed her, that in the midst of all these emaciated and starving people, here was this young girl who was even more so. But through the course of the day and all of the things that they had the job to do, he pushed her aside and kind of forgot about her until later at the end of the day he saw her again, and she just looked sad, emaciated, and he had a moment of kindness. And he remembered that he had a banana in his backpack and took the banana and gave it to the small child, and she looked him in the eye and smiled and walked back. And as he watched her, he noticed that back behind under the tree there was two little boys, probably her little brothers, sitting there. And so he watched as she took the banana, split it in half, gave each of the boys half of the banana, and then ate the banana peel herself. And he said, that moment changed my life. Through that act of service, through that act of graciousness, he chose to change his career and moved into becoming a servant, went to Africa to help serve and to help empower individuals to change their lives. You see, it's a beautiful thing to see somebody who has so little willing to give what they have for the betterment of someone else. As we talked about last week, when we talk about being of service, we're not asking that you give up your life. We're not asking you to become Mother Teresa. We're not asking that you give up everything. But we are suggesting that there is a way of being in the world that lives somewhere between enabling and martyrdom, right? Enabling being that of doing for others what they could and should be doing for themselves. Anyone else guilty? And martyrdom, doing for others because it makes us feel like we're okay after all. We're not going to raise hands, but I know who you are, I can tell. However, next week we are going to have 3 different sections of the community. Martyrs will be over here. Right? Here's what I know. In my own life, my life was so stuck when I was trying out how to figure out what worked for me. My life was stuck because I was trying to I was trying to make things happen, I was trying to do things. And oddly enough, it was when I moved into service that my life began to flow. When I began to give my gifts away, when I began to look for ways to serve others rather than to manipulate others into serving me. Because I was all about the manipulation, let me just tell you, right? Until we learn other skills, manipulation works pretty darn good. Not for long, but it does work, right? So when we can move into that place of service, that place of giving, that place of sharing of our gifts, and it doesn't matter, it's a really unique thing. I've heard over the many years of ministry that sometimes people are looking for like this great gift that I'm supposed to do, this great work that I'm to do in the world, my great work. And I often think, it's not about doing great work. It's about doing work. I remember signing up and saying, I'll teach a kids class. I don't know that much about 9 to 12-year-olds, but, I can stand in a room with them. I learned a lot. So there was never the great moment when all the kids fell down and were healed of whatever, stopped being hormonal and started being well-behaved adults. There was none of that. There was just love. And there was just appreciation. And there was just this willingness to see something in them. And in that capacity to see something in them, I rediscovered something within myself. The gift that we have to give is our love, our compassion. You see, Mother Teresa herself. Here's my theory. I don't think Mother Teresa set out to be Mother Teresa. She's like, I got it. Here's my opportunity for fame. I'll go to India, find really poor people, and serve them. She was just Mother Teresa. Her simple acts of service, her willingness to see the beloved in the face of every person she encountered, what was caused her greatness. But she said it beautifully. She said, in this life, we cannot do great things. We can only do small things with great love. I think that's such a powerful reminder. I was reminded of a young man. I came across a young man who was in the system for adoption. And, there's so many challenges in that system itself. And these kids that for whatever reason have ended up in a system where they do not have a loving family. They may move from foster home to foster home. All kinds of things happen. And I was just struck by this young boy's desire to have a family, to have people that cared about him and that loved him. And the great challenge is that as young people get older and older and older, it becomes more and more difficult to find those places for them. And I thought, I was just so struck by this simple act. The question was, what would you like? Would you like your own room? And he's like, I just want a family. I just want people to love me. You see, our needs are so simple sometimes. And it's so easy to take for granted all the blessings that we have. And that willingness to be of service to another in small and great ways. I often find that when I'm stuck, that great Ann Herbert said, and it's become very famous, practice random acts of kindness and senseless acts of beauty. I love that. Beauty just for the heck of it. Create something beautiful and let people enjoy. Do something kind with no expectation of reward. I was sitting, it was Memorial Day a while back, and I was sitting at the restaurant and noticed a guy that was at a table across. He had some gear that identified him as a military guy. And I thought, cool, my opportunity. So I just told the gal, I said, I want to pick up his lunch. And so, when it's time, bring me the tab and I'll take care of it. And she said, okay, well, would you like me to tell him? I said, absolutely not. Just when you give him, just tell him somebody's taking care of this. Thank you for your service. Now, I don't know what that did for the guy, but I can tell you it made my day. right? That willingness to just do something kind and gracious for another because it uplifts them. What is universally true is that we never, ever, ever can outgive the divine. And in what we have found, this is why Jesus taught us that it is better to give than to receive. He was not saying that it was bad to receive. What he was saying is the flow happens out of our willingness to give, our willingness to serve, our willingness to put it out there. That's what starts the flow. And then we should operate with an expectation of a greater good. So, as I said, it's not about finding your great work. Your great work will come to you. It is about doing the thing that is in front of you that feeds your soul and uplifts the consciousness of the planet. Mother Teresa didn't set out to be Mother Teresa. She didn't have an agenda and a 10-year action plan, I'm pretty sure. Martin Luther King did not set out to be Martin Luther King, world-renowned leader. He set out to help to resolve an injustice in the world. And he did it in such a powerful and beautiful way. The reason we all look to Martin Luther King as this great example is not because he set out to be famous, but because he set out and he did his work. And he did his work, and he did his work, and greatness came to him. He set out to serve not just his race, but the human race. He set to bring forward the true concept of Christian love. Love one another, even as I have loved you. Do for the least of these what you would have experienced in your life. And so in one of the last speeches before his assassination, Dr. King said this: everybody can be great because everyone can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve, which is good. You don't have to know about Plato and Aristotle to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love, and you can be that servant. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. There is a place of balance, and that balance comes as we are both willing to give and to receive, as we are willing to serve and to be served. Sometimes I share my great vision for this community, and that is that we evolve as a community and that we each have our own place of understanding of our role in it, and that we each find a place where we can serve, and we do so graciously and joyously for the greater good. And then when it's not our day or our time, we come and we allow others to graciously serve us. We unconditionally receive. I look forward to that day. I hold that vision where there's a balance of giving and receiving, of love flowing. Because you see, there is a cycle of life. So even as we are inviting you to serve, we're inviting you to allow yourself to be served. Something to consider. You don't have to do great things. You simply have to do small things with great love. So I invite you to look within your own heart, within your own being, and to see if there isn't some way that you can serve humanity in the way that's capable for you now, that will bring you greater love and greater joy. Let us pray. As we turn inward, We honor and acknowledge this one life, this one power, this one presence. We simply sense, feel, know that the one life, ever present, always available, is right here, right now. That it is the very intelligence that is coursing through our veins, breathing through our lungs, beating our heart. That this one life expresses in and through and as all creation. That it delights in its self-expression. And so in this moment, let us simply open ourselves to that greater awareness, to that greater possibility. We sense, feel, and know that this one life is our life right here, right now. That there can be no separation except that which we have created in our own mind. So we open ourselves. We open our hearts to the presence of unconditional love. We open our minds to divine wisdom. We're simply allowing ourselves to be the place through which spirit is realized and expressed. Knowing our divine origin, knowing our place of power, knowing our way of being. We simply speak this word of truth. As we hold that awareness of the ever-present reality of wholeness. Knowing that that wholeness expresses through perfect health, through infinite being, through every level of our expression. We accept and enjoy health and well-being and vitality. We know that we live and move and have our very being in the presence of divine love. That which forever and ever gives of itself, that delights in its highest self-expression. And in the presence of divine love, our lives are healed and transformed. We are blessed beyond measure. We find it easy to forgive, to release that which no longer serves us. To see the divine in everyone and everything. And to serve with grace. We know that we are abundant beings because we are one with the source of all that is. And so we are but stewards of divine bounty. And so we graciously give and joyously receive of this bounty. How good it is to bear witness to this spiritual truth and reality. To know that we are the hands and feet of the divine. We give voice to this divine presence. And so we move into gracious acts of service to one another in the knowing that we are one, uplifting the consciousness of the planet itself. How blessed we are. And so we take a moment to give thanks for the many blessings in our lives. The blessings of friends, of family, of shelter, of food, of clothing. And because we are blessed, it is only natural that we extend a blessing. And so we start by blessing this spiritual community, this divine idea unfolding, serving as a beacon of light and of truth and of love in this community. We're grateful for the opportunity to be of service. We extend this blessing to our brothers and sisters around the planet. We're holding that high vision for a planet at peace, for a world that works for all, for a world releasing a sense of separation and recognizing our connection and our unity. We're holding the high vision for a planet at peace and a world that works for all, for an earth that nurtures and sustains all forms of life. And as is our custom, we take a moment to bless all priests, rabbis, ministers, teachers of every faith. For we believe that there are many pathways to the divine. And so we honor and celebrate these many pathways. We're calling forth the highest understanding of compassion and love and service to one another. How good it is to bear witness to this truth. And so it is with a humble and grateful heart that I give thanks for these many blessings. Grateful for this inner realization and grateful for this law of mind operating upon the consciousness that we hold here, bringing forth the highest good for all concerned. And so in joy and in gratitude, I'm simply giving thanks, releasing this word, knowing that it is so. As together we say, and so it is.